The trick that makes retirement possible. If you only learn one concept from my channel, it should be this. Take a look at this article from YouGov.com. Expectations for retirement in the U.S. The majority of Gen Z and millennials believes that they'll need between $500,000 and $2 million to retire. This other article from NASDAQ.com references an analysis done by WealthCare Financial that says that Gen Z and millennials will need to have $3 million in retirement savings.
A lot of dough. Wow.
Most people can't save enough money from their salaries to reach $500,000, much less $3 million. Does that mean that financial freedom and retirement are impossible? For some people, maybe. But the thing that makes it possible for normies like you and me who weren't born rich is compound interest. Or if you want to be picky, technically compound interest and compound growth. I repeat, if you only learn one concept from my channel, it should be this. Albert Einstein is often attributed as saying that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. It's one of those internet things that is pretty much impossible to tell if he actually said it, because I don't think there's any video proof or a reputable citation. Regardless of whether Einstein said it, though, another highly respected public figure, Warren Buffett, wrote in his autobiography that compounding is like a snowball rolling down a hill, gaining snow and momentum as it rolls. Let's say you're 23 years old and you earn $50,000 a year, and you can save $5,000 a year after taxes and expenses.
We got $5,000. We got $5,000.
You take that $5,000 each year and stick it under your mattress. To calculate out how much you would have at age 65, a reasonable retirement age, you take the $5,000 that you can save each year and multiply it by 42, the number of years between 23 and 65. That gets you to $210,000. If we assume that the Social Security program is either dying or dead by then, and your expenses and taxes are about $45,000 a year, then that $210,000 would last you fewer than 5 years. Unless you only plan to live until age 70, this isn't nearly enough, and we didn't even adjust our calculation for inflation. Now let's take a look at this thing called interest. Interest pays you a certain percentage of your money regularly. For instance, if you have $1,000 in a savings account that pays 4% interest per year, you could do a quick multiplication to see that you can expect to get paid $1,000 times 0.04 equals $40 in interest. It's actually a bit more than that, but we're keeping things simple. That $40 gets added to your account, so you have $1,040. If you immediately withdraw that $40 from your account and your interest rate stays the same, you will get another $40 next year. If you did that for 10 years, you'd have $400. However, if you do not withdraw that $40 every year, then the bank will pay the 4% interest on the $1,000 you put in and the interest that they paid you. The second year will pay 4% on $1,040, not just $1,000. So the interest would be $41.60, more than the $40 the year before. You're probably like, okay, so $1.60 difference, big whoop.
It's like $1 an hour.
Let's keep going though. The next year, the starting amount would be $1,081.60, and you'd get $43.26 in interest. The year after, you'd start with $1,124.86 and earn $44.99 in interest. By year 10, you're making $57 in interest instead of $40, close to 50% more than if you were taking out the interest every year. Instead of the $400 total interest after 10 years if you took out the interest every year, it's $480 in interest if you leave the interest in the account. That's what compounding interest is. It's when the bank pays you interest, you leave it in your account, and the next time the bank pays you interest, it's not just paying on the money you put in, but also the money the bank itself paid you in interest. The bank is paying you interest on the interest money that they gave you. Again, in the example, it might not seem like that much, but you only put in $1,000. An $80 difference on a $1,000 investment is significant. There are two ways to help show how big of a difference it is. The first way to show how big of a difference there is with compounding is to simply use bigger numbers. If you had started with $10,000 instead of $1,000, by year 10 you'd make $800 more interest with compounding than taking the interest out every year. If you started with $100,000 instead of $1,000, it'd be $8,000 more in interest. That's money that your money is making you without you doing anything other than letting it compound and grow on itself. The second way to see the impact is to stretch out the time further. What if we start with $1,000 but keep going, and instead of 10 years, we push it out to 40 years? In 40 years, if you took out the interest you made every year, the total amount of your account with the money you put in plus the interest you got over the 40 years would be $2,600. You received $1,600 in interest over the 40 years, more than the amount you originally put in. What if you'd left the interest in your account at the end of the year instead of pulling it out? If I did my math right, you'd have $4,800. Math accuracy not guaranteed. The amount you'd get from the bank in interest over that time is almost 4 times more than the amount of money you put in. Historically, there has been an average of 9 to 10% returns on investments into 500 of the largest U.S. companies together as a group. That group is called the S&P 500.
500 of the most important companies like Walmart, Johnson & Johnson, and Disney.
There's a stock market investment you can buy called an index fund that makes it quite simple to invest in the S&P 500. I saw a recent example that if you bought your kids $7,500 worth of S&P 500 index funds at their birth and didn't do anything else, if the S&P 500 kept growing the way it has for the last 150 years, by the time they were 65, they would be millionaires from that one investment alone. I ran it through a compound interest calculator to check it, and it looks like the numbers work. One last thing to note is that there is actually a difference between the terms compound interest and compound growth. Compound interest is like the example of the bank and a savings account, where the bank is paying you interest every so often and adding it to your account. Compound growth is similar, but it's an investment that grows as its value increases. There isn't something like interest that's getting added. It's the idea that an investment, like a stock or index fund, can increase more in dollar value over time with the same percentage increase. Suppose a stock's value is increasing 8% per year. If you buy at $1,000 and it grows 8% the first year, its value grows $80 and is worth $1,080 at the start of the second year. If it grows another 8%, it doesn't grow $80 again. It grows $1,080 times 0.08, which is $86.40. After 10 years, if I did my math right, 8% growth is $172.71, even though 8% growth on the same stock was originally $80 in the first year. Closing the loop on the first example with a 23-year-old that can save $5,000 per year and would end up with $210,000 at age 65. If the 23-year-old can invest the $5,000 per year instead of just saving it and gets 4% per year over the 42-year period, they would end up with around $545,000 instead of $210,000. If they could get 8%, which is less than the historical average of the S&P 500, you might think it would be about double the 4% number, which was $545,000, so a little over $1 million. However, since compounding grows on the growth, they would actually have almost $1.65 million, about 3 times the number for 4%.
We're rich! We're rich! We're rich! We're rich! We're rich!
Key points to remember. First, time is a multiplier. Time is the multiplier that turbo boosts the process. The earlier you can start the compounding, the more you'll have in the end. An extra 10 years makes a giant difference. An extra 20 years is a game changer. Second, when talking about compounding, small percentage differences like 0.5% can mean tens or hundreds of thousands difference. Third, debt prevents any of this good compounding from working for you and is sort of this concept in reverse, especially credit card debt and payday loans. The amount you get from the loan is a small piece of the total you pay back because of interest. Some loans will never end if you only pay the minimum, and if the amount the minimum covers is less than the interest that is added to what you owe. I am not a financial advisor, and I share financial concepts, not financial advice. All views are my own and not my employer's. I plan to start live streaming weekday afternoons later in January, so please subscribe if you want to be notified when I am streaming. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.